You know, when you see a massive skyscraper being built right in the middle of a city, the first thing you notice isn't the building itself.
Oh, right. It's the scaffolding.
Exactly, the scaffolding. It's
Mhm.
completely covered in these, well, these temporary steel pipes, wooden planks, the safety netting.
Yeah.
It just dominates the skyline. And for months, or I mean even years, that ugly utilitarian cage is all anyone actually sees.
Right, but it's an entirely essential mechanism for the construction process. I
Yeah.
mean, without that framework, you can't hoist the
You
materials.
definitely can't support the workers.
Exactly, and you certainly can't build the permanent structure inside, but, and this is key, nobody buys a ticket to go look at scaffolding.
No, definitely not.
It is definitively not the architecture you're meant to be admiring.
Yeah. You would never mistake the scaffolding for the actual building. And when that skyscraper is finally finished, when the glass is polished and the doors are ready to open to the public, they don't leave the pipes up as some kind of, I don't know, a monument to how hard the construction
But
was.
tear it all down.
They tear all that scaffolding down. It has served its purpose.
Mhm.
Leaving it up wouldn't just be absurd, it would actively block people from actually entering the building.
Right, it would turn a temporary tool into a permanent obstacle.
Exactly. And that idea, tearing down the temporary structures once the real work is
Yeah.
done, that is the exact lens we are looking through today. We are taking a deep dive into excerpts from a text titled Religion as a Bridge to Universal Peace.
Specifically, a section called The Ultimate Purpose of 21st Century Religion.
Right, and this comes from the autobiography of Reverend Myung Moon.
But before we start examining these blueprints, we really need to establish some firm ground rules for you, the listener.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because this material touches on incredibly personal, often volatile themes. We're talking about global religion, ideology, theology.
The big stuff.
Right. So our goal today is absolutely not to endorse or to critique this specific theology. We are basically acting as architectural inspectors today.
I love that.
We are here to rigorously examine the mechanics of these arguments, the historical critiques being made, and the philosophical framework that's presented in the text.
We are purely looking at the structural integrity of the ideas.
Wow.
And, well, here is the hook. The absolute most surprising insight that jumped out at me from these pages. Are you ready?
Let's hear it.
What if the ultimate final goal of a religious leader is to make religion itself completely obsolete?
I mean, it is a radical framework,
Yeah.
especially coming from someone who spent their entire life leading a global religious movement.
Right.
Proposing that your own life's work is meant to eventually be dismantled, it goes against almost every instinct of institutional preservation.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand why this framework argues that religion is heading toward obsolescence in the 21st century, we have to establish the historical baseline being used.
We have to look at the massive collective hangover of the 20th century.
By hangover, yeah.
The argument paints the 1900s as a century of unprecedented, almost violent whiplash.
Whiplash is a good word for it.
Yeah, the premise is that more fundamental change happened to human society in that single 100-year period than during the entire past 2,000 years combined.
Which is wild when you slow down and look at the timeline. The sheer scale of the disruption is just staggering. I mean, you have people who were born into a world of horse-drawn carriages who lived to see the atomic bomb,
Right.
the splitting of the atom, the moon landing, all in one lifetime.
And alongside that technological explosion came profound ideological trauma.
Yeah.
The framework characterizes the 20th century by two devastating global world wars, the rapid, bloody rise and subsequent collapse of communism, and ultimately a profound global pivot toward materialism.
So it's like in the midst of all this rapid change and destruction,
Uh-huh.
humanity effectively tried to numb itself.
Exactly. We turned our backs on spiritual development and just buried ourselves in material accumulation.
And basically tried to buy our way out of the trauma. Which brings us to the tension of the 21st century. I mean, we live in an era where incredible advances in science and technology explain the mechanics of the universe so thoroughly that a lot of traditional religious beliefs can start to look like, well, like ancient superstitions.
Science is aggressively stepping into the explanatory territory that religion used to hold a monopoly on.
Right. So if science can explain the origin of the cosmos and the building blocks of life, the natural question is why religion needs to exist at all anymore.
But the framework pivots here. It contends that religion remains absolutely vital, not to explain how it rains or why the sun rises, but for two very specific, unresolved reasons.
Okay, what are they?
First, because the spiritual aspect of human beings is a tangible reality that science simply hasn't satisfied. I mean, material wealth hasn't cured human misery.
That is undeniably true.
And second, because a world of true, lasting peace has not yet been established.
Ah, so until that peace is built, the scaffolding stays up.
Exactly. And this introduces the core argument of the entire piece, which completely redefines the job description of faith.
How so?
The argument states that the sole purpose of religion is to bring about an ideal world of peace. Period. The reason religious institutions evangelize shouldn't be to score theological points.
Or to build massive, wealthy empires.
Right. It is strictly to increase the number of citizens living in a cooperative world without war.
Wow.
What's fascinating here is the sheer utilitarianism of that view. Religion is positioned merely as a means to an end, never an end in itself.
That's a huge shift.
It is. The logic flows like this. If the original intention for the world was love and peace, then creating division by insisting that your specific religion is the single, exclusive path to salvation actively subverts that intention.
So insisting you are the only valid path isn't just missing the point. It is actively working against the ultimate goal of peace.
Yes.
And that the text provides an incredibly practical, everyday example to illustrate this it stopped me in my tracks.
It's a family example.
Yes. It argues that if a person's attendance at church is creating conflict and division within their own family, they are explicitly advised to put their family first.
The harmony of the family supersedes the obligation to the religious institution.
Right. And for a religious figure to deprioritize their own institution's attendance numbers in favor of a family's internal harmony is a massive paradigm shift.
Historically, institutional religion has often demanded absolute loyalty. I mean, you frequently see historical examples where faith demands loyalty explicitly at the expense of family or community ties.
If those family members happen to sit outside the boundaries of that specific faith.
Exactly.
So think of religion as a vehicle. You don't just sit in a car for the sheer thrill of sitting in a parked car. You use it to drive to a destination.
Right. The destination here is peace, reconciliation, harmony.
Exactly. And if the car, meaning the physical church, the institutional loyalty, the weekly attendance, if that car is actively ruining the road trip for your family, the argument is basically saying, get out of the car.
Get out of the car.
The car is just a tool.
Yeah.
The destination is the entire point.
If the vehicle is preventing you from reaching the destination, you must abandon the vehicle or at least radically change how you are operating it.
So if the vehicle of religion is supposed to be driving humanity toward global peace, we have to ask, why is the road trip going so poorly?
Right. Why are we constantly crashing into each other?
Exactly. If the goal is a unified world, why is the real world so incredibly divided?
To answer that, the critique moves to a macro level, analyzing geopolitics. The framework makes the rather bold claim that the era of nationalism has fundamentally ended.
Oh, wow.
It points out that humanity is currently fractured into over 200 countries, all separated by heavily fortified national borders. But it insists that these geographic borders cannot endure eternally.
Because they're artificial constructs.
Right, and they fail to solve global human crises.
Now, wait, I need to push back here on behalf of you, the listener.
Yeah.
Saying the era of nationalism is over feels like a massive disconnect from reality when you look at the news today. I mean, borders seem more aggressively defended than ever. We are seeing a resurgence of nationalism, not the end of it.
That's a fair point. But the observation in the text is less about current political polling and more about philosophical trajectory.
Okay, what does that mean?
The argument is that borders are ultimately incapable of containing or solving modern human problems, whether that's ecological collapse, economic instability, or the threat of war.
Because climate change doesn't stop at a passport-controlled checkpoint.
Exactly. Because borders are artificial, the framework argues that only religion possesses the foundational cultural power to overcome them. Religion speaks to a shared human spirituality that naturally supersedes lines drawn on a map.
But the institutions holding that power have completely fumbled the ball.
Oh, totally.
Instead of acting as the bridge across national borders, religions have just built their own borders. They have divided themselves into fiercely competitive factions.
It's an active paradox. The very institutions tasked with unifying humanity have fallen into a deeply selfish thought process. They prioritize the survival, the wealth, and the dominance of their own specific faction over the broader goal of global peace.
It's so counterproductive.
By congregating strictly by religion or race, The framework warns that humanity is locked into a cycle where repeating the wars of the past is unavoidable.
It reminds me of a hyper-competitive high school group project.
Oh, I know those.
Right. Everyone is supposed to be working together to get a good grade for the whole group, but instead, everyone is secretly hoarding their own notes, refusing to share research, and trying to sabotage the other members so they look like the smartest person in the room to the teacher.
And the group fails because the individuals are obsessed with their own specific glory.
Exactly. And because of that institutional selfishness, the framework argues that the days of one single country or one single religion standing at the forefront to lead all of humanity are over.
It calls for a new ideology and philosophy that goes beyond the traditional boundaries of Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam.
Let me stop you there, because that phrasing is tricky. If this framework is calling for an ideology that goes beyond the major world religions, is it asking believers to completely abandon their faith?
That's the immediate question, right?
Yeah, is the prescription here to throw away centuries of tradition and start over from scratch?
A close reading of the text shows it's not advocating for the eradication of faith. It is advocating for the eradication of factional selfishness.
Oh, okay.
The text argues that no ideology or religion from the past is capable of bringing about global unification in its current factionalized form. The author actually mentions that for his entire life, he has pleaded with people until his voice is hoarse to step over their religious walls.
So it's a call for institutional evolution.
Exactly.
You don't have to stop being a Christian or a Buddhist, but you do have to stop using your Christianity or your Buddhism as a weapon
Right.
to defeat the other group. The material affluence of the 20th century didn't make us happy, and doubling down on religious tribalism won't make us safe.
Which is why the text issues 3 direct, functional appeals to religious leaders globally.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, they must actively respect the traditions of other religions to prevent conflict.
Makes sense.
Second, religious communities must pivot their vast resources to cooperate in serving the world rather than enriching themselves.
Also makes sense. And the third?
Third, leaders must actually sit down and engineer a mutual structure for world peace.
So it's not just holding hands and singing songs, it's asking them to dismantle the actual bureaucracies of rivalry.
Yes. And to explain why these borders and divisions are so unnatural, the argument relies on a biological metaphor. It looks at human anatomy.
Oh, right. The anatomy analogy is crucial to understanding the mechanics of this philosophy.
The text points out that the right eye doesn't exist just to look out for the right side of the face. The right eye is there for the sake of the left eye, and the left for the sake of the right.
Together, the two eyes exist to serve the entire body.
Right. Nothing in the human body is designed to exist purely for its own isolated benefit.
Which is such a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Because if a group of cells decides it only cares about its own survival and starts hoarding resources at the expense of the rest of the body, we call that a tumor.
Exactly. Applying that biological reality directly to faith means that religion, too, cannot exist for its own sake. It exists entirely for the sake of love and peace within the broader body of humanity.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because if you follow that logic to its absolute, inevitable conclusion, the text makes its most radical claim.
Let's hear it.
Quote, "Once world peace is accomplished, there will be no further need for religion."
The ultimate success metric for a religious institution is its own disappearance.
It's exactly like a doctor whose ultimate life goal is to cure disease so thoroughly, to eradicate illness so permanently from the human genome that they put themselves entirely out of a job. They just lock the doors to the hospital, throw away the key, and walk away because nobody will ever need medical intervention again.
This raises an important question about the fundamental identity of religious figures.
How do you mean?
If you accept this premise, religious leaders are no longer defenders of ancient dogma. They aren't protectors of an institution. They are strictly, as the text defines them, apostles of peace.
Apostles of peace.
Their only metric for success is how much closer they bring the world to harmony, fully knowing that crossing the finish line means their own institution dissolves.
They have to actively build the mechanism of their own obsolescence,
Right.
which requires a level of institutional selflessness that fights against the basic survival instinct built into every human organization.
It demands that deeply entrenched, heavily resourced institutions willingly dismantle their own power structures for the greater good of a unified human family.
Okay, so we have this radical framework. We acknowledge the trauma of materialism. We view religion as a temporary vehicle. We decide to tear down the artificial borders of nations and factions.
Yes.
We agree to work toward a peaceful world where religion itself is no longer needed. But how on earth do we practically achieve this? How do you rewire a global society to actually crave peace instead of competition?
The framework acknowledges that creating an environment where people's hearts are filled with a craving for peace is incredibly difficult because human nature is so currently conditioned for conflict.
Oh, absolutely.
The only practical mechanism for this kind of rewiring is continuous systemic education.
So if you want to dissolve the religious factions of the future, you have to change how you train the children of the present.
Precisely. The text notes that the author devoted himself to projects in the educational field very early on. It cites the founding of the Sunwa Art School, which was established even before his own religious movement had fully stabilized.
Wow, so education was always the priority.
Yes. The philosophy views schools not just as job training centers, but as holy places where foundational truths about human coexistence must be taught.
And this leads into a fundamental critique of what modern education has actually become. The argument is that the global education system is almost entirely focused on engineering a winner-take-all society.
It describes an educational mechanism where students are trained that finishing first is the only goal, and that the prize for finishing first is a monopoly on happiness and resources.
I mean, think about your own time in school, listener, or maybe the pressure your kids are under right now. How much of the educational experience is based on the grading curve?
So much of it.
You're literally taught that in order for you to get an A, someone else must get a C or an F. It's a zero-sum game. The system trains you that coexisting is secondary to conquering. If I win, you have to lose.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the text scales that individual classroom competition directly up to the geopolitical level.
All right.
It warns that nationalistic education guarantees a dark future. The specific example used is chillingly logical. If the United States educates its youth only for the sake of advancing the United States, and Britain educates its youth only for the sake of advancing Britain, humanity is doomed to endless conflict.
Because you aren't solving the problem of division, you're just training smarter, more capable people to fight for their own faction.
Exactly.
They're handing the next generation better engineering degrees. They can build higher, stronger walls.
You are optimizing the tumor instead of healing the body.
Oof, yeah.
The alternative curriculum presented in the text argues that schools must shift their focus to teaching fundamental, unifying truths. It lists knowing God, recognizing the origin and shared responsibility of human beings, and realizing that the ultimate purpose of human existence is to create an ideal, cooperative world.
It's a complete reimagining of the curriculum. The primary option shifts from how do I succeed in the market and beat my competitors to how do I fulfill my responsibility to the global family.
And this brings the responsibility right back to the religious scholars.
How so?
The argument insists they don't need to be standing at the front of a room debating complex theological theories or lecturing about why their specific denomination is superior.
Their role in this new educational paradigm is to impart the practical wisdom needed to resolve modern social problems.
Right.
They must teach students the principle of selflessness.
Right. The core message they are tasked with delivering is that humanity is one brotherhood and sisterhood, and that the world is one single interconnected family.
And the framework reiterates that providing this wisdom teaching the heart and ideal of the universal origin is exactly why religion must remain active right now, even when science can explain the physics of the stars.
Science can map the highway, but religion has to set the GPS destination for the human journey.
I love that. But this is the absolute condition for success. They can only provide that GPS destination if they immediately cease all their internal and external struggles.
Yes. Religious leaders have to stop fighting to protect their own honor. They have to pool their wisdom, actively forget centuries of historical hatreds, and focus entirely on being temporary apostles of peace.
Well, we've covered some incredibly dense terrain today. We started by looking at the sheer exhaustion of the 20th century, 100 years defined by brutal world wars and humanity's desperate attempt to replace spiritual meaning with material wealth.
From there, we explored the argument that the antidote to that materialism isn't to double down on religious tribalism, but to view religion merely as a temporary vehicle, a vehicle designed strictly to drive humanity toward global peace.
We analyzed the call to tear down the artificial borders of both nations and religious factions. We looked at the active paradox of using institutions meant to unify the world as weapons to divide it. which is a guaranteed recipe for repeating the trauma of the past.
And finally, we unpack the practical mechanics of this philosophy, the urgent need to fundamentally reform our winner-take-all education systems. We discussed replacing a curriculum of selfish, zero-sum competition with the principles of selflessness and a shared global family.
So what does this all mean?
I think the most vital takeaway for you, the listener, is a question of alignment in your own daily life.
Yeah.
This framework asks you to deeply examine where you might be putting institutions ahead of the people those institutions were originally built to serve. Whether it is in your workplace culture, in your fierce political affiliations, or within your own faith community.
Are you spending your energy defending the temporary scaffolding? Or are you focused on building the actual lasting structure of coexistence?
It challenges us to look at our own subtle winner-take-all mentalities and ask if there is a more selfless way to operate.
Why fight over who has the prettiest steel pipes when the goal is the beautiful building inside? That is such a clarifying way to look at our own biases.
It really is.
And that leaves us with one final lingering thought to chew on today. The framework makes the incredibly bold claim that once universal peace is finally achieved, religion will have completed its job and will disappear entirely.
Right.
But the text also insists, as a core premise, that humans are fundamentally spiritual beings.
Okay.
So I want you to imagine for a second that humanity actually pulls this off.
Okay.
We get there in a perfectly peaceful world, a world with absolutely no religion, no churches, no temples, no doctrine at all. What exactly does human spirituality look like?
It's a profound question. I mean, if the vehicle has finally arrived at the destination and we've all gotten out of the car, how do we walk?
Something to think about as you go through your day. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your curiosity with us. We love taking these deep dives with you. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep looking past the scaffolding.